John, welcome, and thank you so much for getting up so early in order to join us for this conversation.
Philippa, it's a great honour to be with you. I salute you as a friend personally, but as a friend to the things that we believe in, the flourishing of our fellow human beings in our own countries and around the world.
Thank you, John. And John, you've heard that last video that we have just been watching together. And since 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall, we have seen that many nations have undergone the most extraordinary growth in their prosperity. What do you see as the key building blocks that underpin that prosperity?
Well, Philippa, I think it was a terrific little video. It just shows the quality of the work that you do at Legatum. That the collapse of the Berlin Wall, in a sense, threw into stark relief the difference between democratic capitalism and the prosperity that it delivered, and the misery that the alternative in Eastern Germany and across Europe, in communist Europe, was providing for its citizens. And people wanted better. One system worked, one did not. And so, as Francis Fukuyama put it, we thought the end of history had arrived, a play really on Karl Marx, who thought the end of history would be some sort of nirvana based on a communist state. In reality, democracy won out and democracy became a winner. People wanted to embrace it. It spread widely with enormously and much more positive outcomes than people generally recognize. There was a peace dividend. People were able to divert their attention and their resources away from defense. That's all under threat again now because of the problem of the rising of authoritarianism again in very alarming ways. But what we saw was really quite spectacular, and many people have done far better as a result. I think I would come to four essential freedoms that you've touched on. Let's elaborate them briefly. Freedom, I would say, freedom of the thing that's most dear to us all if we stop and think about it. What do we really believe? What do our consciences demand us to do? If we're to be true to ourselves, we need freedom in that area to believe as we choose earnestly, having thought long and hard about it. Secondly, there is freedom of speech, perhaps the freedom by which we defend all others. We have then freedom of assembly. There's no real freedom if you can't meet with people that you agree with, even discriminate against people without rejecting them or demeaning them with whom we have differences. But there's also the freedom to own property, to trade property, to purchase property. If I'm a humble farmer in a capitalist or free enterprise society, if I produce an extra dozen eggs, I know they're mine to use as chips to trade and build my prosperity. If I live in an authoritarian or a feudal arrangement where my overlord can remove it from me, why will I bother producing that extra dozen eggs so that I can prosper and somebody else can profit by being able to purchase them so they can get on with their comparative advantage? These things are incredibly interwoven, incredibly importantly interdependent. And when people are able to enjoy them, and take them forward in confidence, they then in a democracy are able to create a government that reflects their will. Government becomes a function of the will of the people rather than the people having to subject themselves to being shaped by government. And I think that's where real freedom and personal prosperity and flourishing lies, or the basis of them lies.
John, it looks as though developed nations are taking some of what you have just been describing for granted. What do you see as some of the greatest threats for developed nations?
In a strange way, I think that one of the problems is that feelings now outweigh data. I mean, so much of what you put together with the Prosperity Index is hard information that provides a real pathway based in reality, not in feelings. And we need to reconnect. What do I mean by that? Well, if you take free speech, which we all proclaim is so important, we know that on American campuses, and this has spread right across the West, from around 2014, free speech became not the means by which, say, a minority defends their rights, but a mechanism seen as one which allows majorities to, if you like, attack and undermine and hurt and damage minorities. This is an extraordinary reversal in thinking. And I think it's a great shame and very dangerous indeed. So you've seen this sort of relentless attack on the credibility, if you like, or the cultural credibility of our institutions. Our freedoms in the West are not so much under threat at this point in time, in my view, from military coercion, dangerous as the times are, or the collapse of our institutions, but the collapse in the belief in our core values and the institutions that keep those core values properly functioning and effective. I think it's very concerning. We're almost entering an age of self-loathing.
And John, this stagnation that we have been talking about tonight has obviously happened during COVID-19, but you've reflected on these issues that you've just been sharing with us and your concerns. You know, as somebody who's been reflecting for a period of time on this, do you think they go much deeper than just this COVID-19 moment?
I do. I think we've been degrading the quality of public debate. And I think that one of the products of that is that in the sense with COVID, what we've seen is a tendency to focus on health, which is obviously important, but if you get good public outcomes, you've got to balance it with other aspects, such as the impact on people's liberties, the impact on people's mental health of massive lockdowns, and also the morality and the wisdom of purchasing our way out of the problem with borrowed money, in effect, our children's money. We have spent an incredible amount of money. We're now deeply in debt. I also think that the lack of quality debate has further exacerbated another problem that's been referred to very appropriately already this morning. This morning Australian time, the breakdown of trust. And the breakdown of trust in government and between people in Western culture is very dangerous indeed. Whenever 2 or 3 people are gathered together, trust will become an issue. Do I trust these people that I'm with? If so, we can move together in cooperation. If we do not, then I start to look for security. Security becomes more important than freedom and cooperation. And I think there's been a serious breakdown of trust between nations, within nations, even within families, that COVID has exacerbated at the same time as it's left a terrible intergenerational problem of the buildup of debt. So I think it's accelerated trends that were already there. It's advanced history, and it is going to make it more challenging than ever to get people to focus on the very important things that you are drawing our attention to with the Prosperity Index.
John, thank you. And just lastly, before you actually go and have your breakfast this morning, you are one of the most optimistic people that I know. How do you think some of the divisions that you have just been describing, how do you see them being overcome in the future?
Well, it's a good question. I have moments these days when I'm not so optimistic. I really do worry about the polarization that we're seeing in our communities, the tribalization and the breaking down of trust and the emergence of identity politics, which is a default human position rather than of cooperation. But the biggest single thing that gives me cause for hope is that under challenge, people who think clearly, especially many young people, are now really stepping up and saying everything's at risk here. Not enough young people, let me throw that challenge out to be utterly realistic, but the cream are thinking more clearly and are really starting to gear up for leadership. And sometimes, you Brits are brilliant at this, the darkest hour is the one before the dawn, when people really get going, facing challenges. We see the very best of leadership. And that's what we need now. not demagogic leadership, not overbearing leadership, but leadership that is deeply committed to the well-being and the advancement of our fellow human beings.
John, can I just say thank you to you. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your friendship to us as well over the years, and for sharing with us how to overcome some of these challenges. We are hugely grateful that you are with us tonight, or rather, should I say, this morning. Thank you so much.
It's a joy and a privilege.